Great, thanks. Thanks, Margo, for that introduction. And thank you for inviting me. Thanks for having the format that even if my opponent doesn't accept, you still want to hear from me. That is not the case with all groups. We have accepted every single invitation we've been offered, just for example. So as you know, my name is Judge Lori Kornblum. I am a judge on the Wisconsin Court of Appeals. I am the incumbent in this race, and I am loving my job. It is a wonderful job, and I love to serve the people of Wisconsin in this capacity. So you all know that Wisconsin's a state in which people choose their judges through elections. And even though I was appointed by Governor Evers, I will be on the ballot on April 5th, which is less than 3 weeks away. So in football terms, we are in the red zone. We are running a grassroots campaign in all 12 counties. We have volunteers sending out thousands of postcards, distributing thousands of pieces of literature, and posting yard signs throughout the 12 counties. We have been to every county, either in person or via Zoom, most counties in person. And by the next week, we will have been in every county in person. We have built a broad coalition of endorsers and volunteers, including many labor unions and many activist groups. And we appreciate, I know there's people who are on this call who have helped out my campaign, and we appreciate it. This race has a clear choice, and I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind. This is not a race where there's two, people who are more or less the same. I am the only candidate who has spent my career protecting people and keeping communities safe. I share your values. My opponent defended Act 10 in court, which broke the back of public unions. She is supported by the farthest right extremists, Rebecca Clayfish, Nicholson, and Mike Gableman, who are trying to undo illegally the 2020 presidential election and invalidate millions of votes. And she has not disavowed these endorsers. I was a prosecutor for more than 20 years in Milwaukee County, bringing sex offenders and child abusers to justice. My job was to protect victims and children, and that's what I did. I worked with law enforcement, victim advocates, and experts in treating childhood trauma. We did important and meaningful work. As an attorney in private practice, I advocated for people with disabilities, seniors, and foster children. My work helped remove people from unsafe homes, protect them from abuse, and make sure they were safe. I've also been a teacher. I taught at Marquette University and Northeastern University Law Schools, and I taught in the award-winning paralegal program at MATC, and some of you may have some of my paralegals in your law firms. I was a proud member of my union, AFT Local 212, from the day I started at MATC until I took the bench. And before that, I was a member of the State Prosecutors Union. When people ask me, when people tell me what they think is most important in a judge, their answers are consistent. They tell me that fairness, honesty, supporting the laws and the Constitution, and not having a preconceived idea about the outcome of a case are what matter most to them. And that's who I am. My job is to uphold the laws and the Constitution, to do so fairly and impartially, to look at the facts of each case and apply the law, to review cases fairly, and to judge each case on its own merits, and to treat everyone equally. The people of Wisconsin have grown really weary of politicized courts, and they can see that on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. They often can guess at the outcome of a case just by who filed the case. And I'm discouraged by that. That's one of the reasons I'm running, to keep the Court of Appeals from becoming politicized. Where do I get my values and strength? I come from a large family that has supported me and stood by me all my life. I have had great mentors, starting with clerking for Justice Shirley Abrahamson. My husband of 37 years and I live in Ozaukee County. He was born and raised in Waukesha County. He's a psychiatrist whose mission and practice is devoted to serving people in underserved communities. We have 3 wonderful grown children. Our oldest son has autism and is completely nonverbal. Our family has spent his entire lifetime advocating for him and with him to help him live his best life possible. He's a proud community volunteer, and yes, he's been helping on my campaign, putting stamps on postcards, doing what he can. Our daughter is a resident doctor in Tampa, Florida, treating the worst of COVID cases. And our youngest son has chosen to serve an underserved community as a high school English teacher in Queens, New York. We are proud of all of our children. I am in a vicious race. My opponent's attacks are ridiculous and desperate attempts to divert attention from her failings as a judge. She has shown complete disregard for women and victims of crime. Her short sentence for a convicted rapist, where he said it's not like he held a knife to the neck of someone he didn't know and raped her. Her shocking disregard for women victims and minimizing their trauma show that she lacks the judgment, temperament, and ability to serve the people on the Court of Appeals. She is desperate to divert attention from her support by the extreme special interests who are funding her campaign and funding her ads and want to unlawfully overturn the 2020 election and throw our democracy into chaos. But I am running on my record as a prosecutor for over 20 years, as a judge who upholds the Constitution and the rule of law, treats everyone fairly and has compassion for victims, and as someone who shares the values of the people of Wisconsin. So we are in a critical time, and I need your support to get over the finish line to help the voters understand that this race has a clear choice. It's not close. There is no false equivalency. We want to keep the Court of Appeals fair and impartial. And to do that, we need every vote. We need every vote to count. So thanks, and I would love to have your questions.
All right. Do we have any questions? I'm going to just start. I'll start off with Judge Kornblum. What is the most interesting or unusual surprise that you found in your new role?
Well, I'm not really surprised. I will tell you what I really am enjoying. I'm enjoying, right now we have a very collegial court. I'm working with some really great people on the Court of Appeals, and we do what courts should do, which is we review cases, we look at cases, we discuss them where we have differences. We discuss what our differences are, and we figure out how to come to a fair conclusion. So that's really what courts should do. And that has been really great. I mean, that's been really wonderful. So I haven't had any really unpleasant surprises. I would say that the one thing is it's a really, really busy court. Every day we are making decisions. A lot of those decisions you never see. We get requests for motions, for writs. We have a lot of review of criminal appeals, no merit briefs. But I have already written one. I have one, that's not published in the traditional sense, but I have a couple of opinions already out in the time that I've been on the bench, and things move pretty quickly.
All right, other questions?
Looks like Judge Kahn has a question.
Go ahead, Judge Kahn.
Thanks. In terms of the claims that you're making against your opponent, well, first of all, do you want to tell us what she's saying about you? And if these are coming directly from her campaign or from outsiders?
As far as we know, they are coming in from dark money. She is highlighting the fact that I was appointed by Governor Evers. She is, one of her things said that I was part of the Evers-Biden cabal to put the liberals on the bench, pack the courts. She has not, that's really what she's saying. I have not personally heard her ads. A friend of mine said in Walworth County, they're just slamming me as liberal Lori. That's, so it's a total political hit job, which is not unexpected. But my campaign manager, Melissa, is on the line, and Melissa, you may have more information about this than I do.
Good afternoon. It is dark money from a group that's funded by Dick Uline in Illinois, who's doing about $300,000 worth of ads. Scott Walker on his Facebook page made the link very clearly that Lori Judge Kornblum worked for John Chisholm, and John Chisholm is the office that released the fellow on bail and with the Waukesha parade tragedy. That was a inhumane hit. So Walker did that. The ads do say that Judge Kornblum was appointed by Tony Evers and worked for John Chisholm. The ads don't make that connection explicit, but they do say those two sentences. And yes, it is dark money. Our buyer, Maria, has said she's up on radio. We find about $979 of it in Walworth County. I think there's probably going to be more, but for the moment, the money is dark money.
There's
Judge
a,
Korn-
there's
Judge
a
Korn-
note that went up in the chat to put up the counties, and I've started that process. It's a 12 county area. It's basically all of southeastern Wisconsin except Milwaukee County. And Melissa, I would just ask you to verify that and add counties that I have forgotten. There's a lot of counties. If you take a line that goes from Manitowoc County in the north, and you go east from the lake, and you go from Manitowoc, then you go across Calumet County, you cross the tip of Lake Winnebago, then you go to Winnebago County. And then you go down and around, there's a little blip that's Green Lake County, not to minimize Green Lake County, but Fond du Lac County, Washington County, Waukesha County, Walworth County, and then you swing over and it's Racine and Kenosha, and then going back north again, it's Ozaki and Sheboygan. So it's a huge area physically.
And for the non-lawyers on the call today, can you describe, Judge Kornblum, just, that your decisions affect statewide law, not just that district, right? So it's, even though the voters in that area vote for District 2, if you could just describe, what your case is, what implication they have statewide.
Yes. So the Court of Appeals is structured in a way that there are 16 judges on the Court of Appeals, and they are throughout the state of Wisconsin. They're divided into 4 districts. So the District 1 judges are from Milwaukee County. The District 2 is my district. District 3 is north of Highway 29, basically, the entire northern half of the state. And District 4 is everything that is not covered by the other districts. It's southwestern Wisconsin, and they sit in Dane County. However, in Wisconsin, a published Court of Appeals opinion has effect as precedent statewide. So there is actually a publications committee. I'm on the publications committee, where one judge from each of the districts sits on the committee, and then the chief judge, who is Judge Brash right now, sits on the committee. And any case that is possibly to be published to make law for the entire state, the committee actually discusses and decides whether publication should go forward. So the decisions by the Court of Appeals, even if they're from our district or District 4 or whatever, they affect everybody in the state. And this is unlike the federal system, where, say, the Eastern District is separate from the Western District, and the Seventh Circuit only affects certain areas. In our state, the Court of Appeals affects everybody. So a good example of that, for example, was the ballot box case that came in front of the Waukesha County Circuit Court. It was appealed, and they appealed it to District 4, because you actually can appeal it to any district. But District 4 being the court that sits in Madison and has jurisdiction over like the Elections Commission and stuff. So District 4 then ruled on the case, and then they filed an immediate petition to bypass to go to the Supreme Court. So that case is now sitting in the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Jackie Boynton, you had a question you put in the chat. Can you just ask that directly?
Yes. Of those, what I would call pretty scary counties, how are you concentrating your outreach?
Well, we are working with the local Democratic parties in all 12 counties. Every single county we have appeared by Zoom in front of or in person. We have very, very strong people in all 12 counties. I have been there multiple times, and they have very, very good workers there. So even though they seem very scary, this is a get out the vote issue. And we have people getting out the vote. We are also endorsed by Grassroots North Shore, which works in the Ozaki County area. That's part of their territory. We are supported by, we have endorsements by many unions. AFL-CIO, UAW, one of the culinary workers unions, the IBEW Local 495, AFT Local 212, AFT Wisconsin, WEAC. I may be forgetting a few, but we have a lot of union support, and unions work very hard at getting out their people who are in the counties. So in Manitowoc, there's very strong UAW. In Sheboygan County, very strong. In Kenosha County. So we are really running this as a grassroots campaign. And when I say we have people working in every county, we do. People from Green Lake County came down to my garage to pick up yard signs. For example, we've been just traveling all over the place. Today I'm going to Madison for an event, and then I am coming to Waukesha County. So now that we can actually see each other in person, it's so great, but we are really confident that we can win this.
Other questions for Judge Kornblum?
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm an appellate lawyer, so I'm going to ask you about the process. What happens once all the briefs are filed from there until you reach a decision? And if you could include any interaction you have with your law clerks on that. I'd just like to know what happens. What is the process once all the briefs have been filed until you reach a decision?
Okay, so that's actually a really good question, and I'm sure I've already seen your briefs, Nick. So this is, but we have a process where first, when somebody files the notice of appeal, et cetera, first there's a process of collecting all the transcripts, which takes a long time. And then people have a certain amount of time to file their written work, their briefs. Those then are, the record is established, the record is certified, and then those are assigned to panels. So so there's two different kinds of opinions. One opinion is a one judge case, and those are by statutes. Things like Chapter 51 cases, children's cases, things like that are one judge cases. Everything else is a three judge panel. And that's, again, by statute. It's not because somebody in the clerk's office looks at the case and says, oh, this merits a three judge panel. It's just done by what kind of case it is. Those are then assigned. We have in our district, we have 4 three judge panels. There's 4 of us, and they're, kind of sorted out, and we designate them by colors. Other districts designate them by symbols or by numbers, whatever. But so each panel reviews, so every judge reviews a total of 9 cases per, we do it every 2 weeks. So they're just parceled out like that. Our chief judge is Judge Gundrum, who is fabulous. He's a great chief judge, and he does a really great job of administering this. We then meet in decision conferences. We really thoroughly review the case. We review it before we talk about it. We make decisions, and then it's assigned out to somebody to write. And the writing process takes as long as it needs to get the good job done. We want to be right. One of the great things about being on the Court of Appeals, having spent my life as a litigator, where, somebody can tell you that a motion needs to be filed in court in an hour. And in the DA's office, I was often doing that for other people. They would call me and saying, like, I need to have something in court at 1 o'clock and it's noon. And then I'd be rushing. The wonderful thing about the Court of Appeals is you have time to get it right. And so we work very, very hard to get it right. We work with our law clerks. We work with our staff attorneys. There is a lot of checks and balances. When we finish drafting what we think is a great decision, we circulate it. It gets circulated to the other judges on the panel. They have comments. We may make changes in the opinion. It gets checked and cross-checked and cross-checked again. It gets proofread. So it is a long process. And then we make sure for published opinions, once it's published, our judicial assistants actually go through the advance sheets and cross-check them against what we have submitted to make sure that they are published correctly. So that's been a really, really impressive, because as you know, anybody who's done litigation and trial court work, I mean, Judge Dugan and Judge Kahn, when you're in the trial court, things are moving really fast, and you rarely have time to do this kind of work. You do your best. I know you do your best, but I mean, you just don't have the time. But one of the things that I want to just say, that as somebody who has spent a lot of time in trial courts, one of the great things is when you're looking at the records in trial courts, I have a real understanding of how the trial process works. And so, somebody who's not been involved in criminal trials, and you're looking at a criminal trial, and the defendant may highlight one thing that they think is erroneous. And we know that in a trial, hundreds of decisions get made. The trial judges make hundreds of decisions during a trial, any one of which could lead to error. And I think having that perspective of just the ebb and flow of how the trials work is really terrific for me in terms of a perspective. So that's kind of a very deep in the weeds answer. Sorry for the non-lawyers. But you asked a deep in the weeds question, so that's good.
Well, I am an appellate lawyer, and that's what I wanted to know.
Well,
And I'm
it's
sure
good.
sure the other people were fascinated by your answer.
Oh, good.
It is good that you have a lot of experience in criminal law. What is the percentage of cases the Court of Appeals has that involve criminal law? I've heard 75, 80%. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. And the reason is, of course, number one, their lives are on the line, so, and they have access to public defenders. They have an automatic right of appeal. And if they want to appeal, a public defender or a contract attorney is assigned to really go through their case with a fine tooth comb, because we don't want anybody convicted who shouldn't be. Civil cases, we have a lot of civil cases. Most of those cases arise on pretrial summary judgment. But the civil issues run the whole gamut, everything from mask mandates in schools to recreational immunity, to family law cases, to issues involving property disputes, and they really run the whole gamut of cases. I have done civil law too. I don't want to say I was only in criminal law. I have actually done a lot of civil law, but it's just that because we have a high volume of criminal cases, that is particularly useful.
Other questions? Well, while you're thinking about them, I do have another one, and that is the Court of Appeals does not have a lot of oral arguments. What is the standard for that, and why so few?
Well, there's an old saying that I learned when I clerked for Justice Abrahamson that lawyers ought to know, which is you can rarely win a case in oral argument, but you can often lose a case in oral argument. So we keep that in mind. The briefs that we get are outstanding. I mean, by and large, the briefs that we get are really great. And they do adequately convey what is important in a case. And we get concerned whenever we get a brief that when a lawyer says, well, I can't really explain so much what happened, so I need a chance to argue it orally. That's kind of like getting a resume and saying, I can't really explain this 10-year gap in my resume, but when I get an in-person interview, I'd like to tell you about it. Well, you don't get that in-person interview. The Court of Appeals has not held a lot of oral arguments just because the briefs are really good, and we have the entire record too. So the nice thing about everything being electronic is that we have all the briefs electronically. We have the entire record of the case electronically, all the transcripts, all the motions, everything. So even if we have a question about, what the brief is showing, we can dig down and we can read the transcripts, we can read the record. I would say the main thing, and the problem is in oral argument, if it's not in the record, it doesn't count anyway. And the main problem that I have seen in some of the cases is that people do not include things in the record that really need to be included. We had one litigator, one person who appealed, who decided not to put in the transcript of the hearing because he was so convinced, he was a pro se litigant, and he was so convinced that he was right on the law that he didn't include the transcript. And that was a really big error on his part, but there's nothing we can do to go back and say, hey, you really need to include the transcript. And I think the clerk did try to ask him about that. He said no. So it's an issue.
Other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question about the bypass process. A case can come to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals can decide to ask the Supreme Court to take it directly. Have you been involved in that? What's involved in that process?
Well, there's two processes. One is a certification process, which is where the Court of Appeals itself certifies a case to the Supreme Court, where we look at the case and we say, we know this is going to go to the Supreme Court on a legal issue, and therefore we want to certify a question to the Supreme Court. That has not happened since I've been there, not to say it won't happen. The second is a petition for bypass, which is filed by the litigants. And there have been multiple cases. I mean, this is a very hot time for litigation. And there are parties who pretty much perceive that the Court of Appeals is meaningless. They have a lot of disrespect for the Court of Appeals. And they say this in their briefs, like, we just don't think the Court of Appeals can do anything about this. So they file a petition to bypass to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sometimes accepts those cases and sometimes it doesn't. And it's not very predictable about which cases they'll accept and which cases they won't. So if they don't accept a case, they just send it back to us. And then we treat it like we would normally. If they do accept a case, then they've got it. And that's totally in their discretion. But one of the
Well, thank you.
Yeah, one of the cases that went up on bypass is the ballot box case. So they accepted that.
I have a question,
Sure.
and thanks for taking the time to be here today. In terms of your practice years, did you have many cases that you took on appeal?
I did a lot of appeals. When I was in the district attorney's office, in my units, we handled all of our own appeals.
Oh, you did?
So I did lots and lots of appeals. I have, out of all the cases that I did, there are actually 3 published cases that came out of my trials. One of which is the Michelle A.D. case. That was the case where the Court of Appeals held that a pellet gun could be considered a dangerous weapon under the law.
A what? I'm sorry, I missed
A pellet gun, a BB gun.
that. Pellet gun, yeah, okay.
Could be a dangerous weapon. Another case involved the community caretaker exception to the search warrant, which actually went up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And they decided that. And another case was whether the juvenile sex offender registration statute was constitutional. So those were the 3, but I did a lot of appeals. And then in private practice, I also did some appeals. People, I guess I got lucky. People sought me out because they knew I knew how to do it. So, and I enjoy it. I really, that was part of my practice. I really do enjoy. So
you really have appellate experience.
Yes.
That really qualifies you, and a successful appellate experience.
Yes. Yeah. I've had a lot of appellate experience, more than most attorneys in my position. And so I felt coming into the Court of Appeals, I understood some. Plus, I clerked for Justice Abrahamson. So if those of you who remember her, we wrote lots and lots of opinions. So I clerked for her. And I also, before that, I was an intern in the California Supreme Court. In California, they have a different system, but as a third-year law student, I spent a semester working in the California Supreme Court, and the interns worked exclusively on death penalty cases. Fortunately, in Wisconsin, we don't have that, but they do there. So I have had more appellate experience than most attorneys in my position, and I think that's one of the reasons the governor appointed me.
Yeah. This is probably a rhetorical question, or just a question that I'd be kind of curious about how the opponent has fared in the appellate courts. And I don't know.
I can't even tell you that because first of all, any cases where she's even had any small part of it, I have recused myself. One of the things that I did as an attorney, I was on the Office of Lawyer Regulation twice. I was the chair of the Board of Administrative Oversight immediately before being appointed to the court. And I was the chair of the Special Preliminary Review Committee for 5 years, and I served it for 7 years. And that's the committee that reviews disciplinary charges against attorneys who are involved in the discipline system. So I am extremely sensitive to ethical issues. And so any case that my opponent is on, even if she only sat in one hearing, if her name is in the record, I have recused myself from all of those cases. So
thank you for that. Yeah. I was just saying rhetorically, I'd like to know how she's fared with the Court of Appeals in terms of her decision making, because
and that I really don't know. I'm sure CCAP could figure that out.
Okay.
Fortunately, I will say for most judges in the trial courts get affirmed. There are very few reversals because we have really good judges in our trial courts. I mean, who follow the law. The issues that I have with my opponent are on her discretionary sentencing. For example, the case that we're highlighting in our ads was a vicious, brutal sexual assault by force of somebody that this guy knew. And it was a jury trial. The jury convicted him, and the prosecutor recommended 7 years, which is a pretty tough sentence. She gave him a couple of months and made this comment about, it's not like he held the knife to a neck of a stranger and raped her. You know, that's so demeaning to victims and re-traumatizing to victims. And that's not the only case. I mean, she's, you know, she has her patterns are not good on crimes against children and crimes against women. So it's this lack of respect that I want to highlight, because I spent my whole life protecting children and women and people who are victims of really traumatic crimes.
Other questions for Judge Kornblum?
Yeah, I've got one, kind of a technical question. As an appellate lawyer, I feel like every appeal that I file, I should win. Obviously, that doesn't happen. I've learned that long ago. I tell young appellate lawyers, get ready to lose. That's just the way it is. If you did a lot of appeals, I know you probably felt the same way. How has your thinking changed from being an appellate lawyer, thinking you should win, to being an appellate judge?
So as I will say that on behalf of the DA's office, I did win almost all of my appeals because we did a good job. The only one that I lost on behalf of the DA's office was one where it was a very bizarre statute. And we were arguing that a certain thing fit within the statute, a sexual assault fit within the statute. And the Court of Appeals said, nah, I don't think so. But I remedied that. I ran into Alberta Darling at a function about a week later, and I mentioned it to her, and that statute was changed within 2 weeks. It was the fastest legislative action I've ever seen. So that was, we were arguing something that couldn't be argued. As an appellate judge, I think the thing to keep in mind always is just the judges are really paying attention to the statutes and to whether things really fit statutory criteria, whether they fit within the law. And then, always looking at the standards for review of discretion. So as an appellate lawyer, when, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And that's just always the way it is. And I'm sure you explain that to your clients, but that's just the way it is. But on some cases you have multiple parties and, it becomes even more complicated.
Yeah, thank you. While you were gone there, I was just commenting briefly that our circuit court judges are very good and the federal judges are excellent. And when I get appeals, sometimes I read everything and wonder, what the heck am I going to appeal here?
Right.
It's not going to be frivolous. And
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. Do you find that frustrating that you're affirming all these cases?
No, I think it's a great testament to the justice system that we have really excellent judges in the circuit court who do their job and apply the law. And there is a wide range of discretion, and we don't reverse a lot of the time. The published cases where you see reversals, you don't see all the summary affirmances. We have 3 different kinds of opinions. One is just a summary affirmance or a summary reversal. Those are many of our cases, and you don't see those. Those are really just directed to the parties in the action. And they're just like, this is why we're going to affirm or whatever. Then we have per curiams, which are decisions that we want people need to see what the Court of Appeals is thinking, but they can't be cited for anything. And then we have unpublished authored opinions where we really think the legal community should see what's going on and to see what's going. And then we have our published opinions. So all of these cases, though, these are not like staff attorneys are writing them, and showing them to us. We are making those decisions, but it depends on what the audience is. So, but it's really good to see the work that goes on in the trial courts, and it's good to see the excellent lawyering. I mean, and especially on the part of the public defenders and the Attorney General's office, who are working on the criminal cases. We feel it's great to feel so much confidence that people, especially whose lives are on the line, have such phenomenal legal representation. That's a really great thing.
I have a question.
Sure.
A year ago, less than a year ago, there was an election for the same Court of Appeals district. Governor Evers had appointed a fantastic, experienced, well-rounded person to serve as judge on the Court of Appeals, Jeff Davis, and he was defeated, clearly defeated in this district by a relatively unknown or perhaps totally unknown lawyer. You're running against someone who's had several elections, won several elections in Waukesha County as a circuit court judge, and is really well known, particularly among the Waukesha County community. How can you do this? I mean, like, what makes you think you can win?
Well, first of all, I have a huge amount of grassroots support, and this is going to be about getting out the vote. That's people are, I have been blessed and humbled by the fact that people are so excited to be working on my campaign. And when I meet people and they want to go out and get the vote out and do yard signs and do all these things that are not so great, it's really great. I can't speak to Jeff Davis. Yes, he was very qualified. He was a great judge. I supported him. I mean, but 2 years before, the year before that, we had Lisa Neubauer, who won this district, and she was a Doyle appointee. You know, I would differ with the assessment of my opponent's name recognition. I have been making hundreds of calls throughout my district, and I will tell you that there are many lawyers in Waukesha County who I call who have never heard of her. So she has name recognition among the people who know her. So I don't feel that there's a real advantage to that. People, you know, so we are working, the critical thing is we do need to keep working on getting out the message, and we are getting out in a grassroots way. We have TV ads running. We need to keep them running. And, you know, we are, you know, I'm not going to wander into this area, but you know that campaigns need a lot of support. And so we are doing everything we can. But there is a path to victory. It is amazing how many people there are who they are excited. They don't like, well, they don't like a lot of things they do see. A lot of people are really sick and tired of all of the attempts to overturn the 2020 election, and that those are the people who are endorsing my opponent. And even though she tries to disavow this, she doesn't really try to disavow this. These people are prominently on her website as her endorsers. They are the people who are supporting her. This is the dark money that's coming in to support her. So I can't speak for her or for other people. All I know is that everybody needs to vote, and we need to get that message out. And that's the most important thing. But I just want to say, I'm confident, okay? If I thought, I mean, and I have a lot of people who are confident, and we, you know, we are going to push it over the finish line.
Any other questions for Judge Kornblum today?
I could ask you questions all day, but I won't do that.
You can call me though. You can call me to ask me questions, and to the extent I can answer, I'm happy to do that, okay?
Well, it sounds like an ex-party kind of thing, which I wouldn't do.
Yeah.
I want to wish you good luck. I think you're a very intelligent and articulate person. And that I just want the best judges on the Court of Appeals, whoever they may be. Unfortunately, I cannot vote in your election, but I will just wish you good luck.
Thanks. And, you know, we have Judge Kahn, I see you put your name your name in the list of endorsers. We love to have endorsers. I know there are people who don't, you know, there's a lot of people who remain neutral or don't like to endorse, but if anybody does want to endorse, you can connect with my campaign. You can go on my website and see what my campaign is doing. You know, this is not an endorsement group, but we have been endorsed by Wisconsin Women Lead, Jacqueline Boynton's group, and we have been endorsed by a lot of other groups. And pushing the word out is really important. So Nick, even though you can't vote in my campaign, you can tell other people, your friends, your neighbors, and everything. And Melissa just put the campaign address, the website address in there. So thank you so much. We have to get people out to vote. And Judge Dugan, I know you've got a whole campaign just getting people out to vote. We need to get people out to vote. This race is the top of the ticket, the top of the ballot in all 12 counties. So this isn't one of those races where, you know, you kind of vote for the things there and you kind of dribble down to the Court of Appeals, right? This is the top ballot position, and I drew the #1 seed. So I am the very top of the ballot. So that's, I think, a really good thing. And so when you tell people to vote, just tell them to look at the top of the ballot and mark the first name they see. Okay. So thank you very much. And Margo, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Yes, so if there are no other questions, we'll wrap up today and let people get on with their day. Thank you so much, Judge Kornblum, for joining us. I want to let you know that our next salon is April 13th. It's at noon with Judge Everett Mitchell from Dane County Circuit Court. And he's going to be talking about the pipeline from child welfare issues to juvenile justice issues to adult prison, and how he and others in Dane County are working to turn that pipeline off. So that will be the topic of his talk at noon on Wednesday, April 13th, again by Zoom. And I want to let you know that we have rescheduled our big event that we were supposed to have last September that we had canceled because of the Delta variant. We have rescheduled that for May 19th. It's with Mark Joseph Stern from Slate. He's flying in to give us a talk that evening. It's a Thursday evening, and his talk is called Can Democracy Survive the Supreme Court? So he's got a lot to talk about. More information and a link for registration on that will be on our events page on our website, and you'll probably get mailings and emails about it from me from time to time. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope you stay safe until I see you again next month, or whenever I see you at various events as people go back in person. So have a great afternoon, and thank you again.
Thanks. Bye-bye.